Once inside, I could see my dad tied and gagged on the other side of the room. I started to rush forward, but I felt an ice-cold hand firmly grasp my shoulder. It was Sabrina. I looked at her very confused. Then she spoke. "Wait, I think one of my brothers is here." I looked around and I didn't see anyone. Then Vincent spoke. "Oh, Michael, come out. Daddy knows where you're hiding." Then from the shadows came a man looking very much like Vincent. I started to ask, "Who is that?" But before the words escaped my lips, Sabrina answered me. "That is one of my younger brothers. He was tasked at watching over this dimension in my father's absence, but it seems he's gone a little mad with power. A sad tale that I have seen with a few of my brothers." Vincent walked towards his son and said, "There you are, and you have been a very bad boy. We do not hold our associates prisoner." Michael laughed and said, "That may be, but he's just a human who stuck his nose in my business." And the minister replied, "And it seems you have now stuck your nose in my business. So, I guess it is more than fair enough that I do as I wish to get you out of my way." Michael's legs started to shake for a few moments, but then stopped as he smiled. "You think you're stronger than me? But I know I can take you. Ada, activate the shadow drive." It was at this moment that Ada showed up on Vincent's phone. "Sir, Michael has requested permission to the shadow drive." Michael had a look of displeasure on his face. Then Vincent said, "Grant him full use of it." Then Michael started to laugh. "You fool!" It was at this moment I heard Sabrina say, "Ada, activate the zero drive and shield all those in the possible damage area of Michael." I then felt oddly safe. "What did you just do, Sabrina?" I asked. She looked at me and said, "Just watch." As I looked back at Vincent and Michael, they were going at it, fists flying at such speeds I could barely keep up. They fought around the room. Pillars of concrete were getting broken. The ceiling was starting to fall down. That's when I noticed a large piece falling towards us. I ducked and covered, but nothing happened. I looked around to see a pile of rubble to the right. Then Sabrina said to me, "Shields, remember?" I stood back up. Vincent and Michael both looked well battered and bruised. Then Michael said, "If I can't take you out one way, I'll just have to try another." It was at this moment that waves started to come off them, and wave after wave pulsed through the room. "What is he doing?" I asked Sabrina. She answered, "He's going to overcharge himself and try and take down Father." She paused for a moment. "Fool." I looked back over at them and started to notice the walls were starting to be blown out, as well as the ceiling. Vincent walked over to his son, who was laughing maniacally, and wrapped his arms around him and embraced him. And then, everything stopped. "Ada, disengage the zero drive system," Sabrina said. Vincent turned to look at us. His son was gone, and nowhere to be seen. "You two all right?" he asked. "Yes, Father. We are fine." I rushed over to my dad to untie him, his face looking like he had gotten into a fight with a group of men. And then I asked, "Well, how are we going to explain this to Mom?" He laughed. "Don't worry, my son. I've come home looking worse than this before." It was then that Vincent spoke up. "Well, it's good to see you are well, Dr. Cross. But now I do believe we must work out my payments." I looked at my dad quite confused. My dad then said, "Nothing is ever free with you. Now is it, my dear old friend?" Vincent smiled and replied, I did tell you if you went after it, it would cost you. Did I not? My dad smiled and said, that you did, but you didn't tell me it was one of your spawn that would be guarding the Shroud of Turing. Vincent replied, you never asked. My dad sighed in defeat. That is true. So, what is this going to cost me, he asked. Vincent smiled and spoke. Oh, not much. I just find myself in need of an apprentice. And by now, you know the Vatican should have given me one. My dad laughed. Well, I'm too old to work with you. And no, I'm not taking your eternal potion. But then it struck him, and he looked at me, then back at Vincent. I see you've already made your choice, though. But I swear, if he ever comes back dead, or you lose him, I will find a way to plant you in your eternal, final resting place. Vincent simply laughed and held his hand out to my dad. It's a deal, then? He asked. My dad reached up and took his hand and shook it. As he was lifted up from the floor, my dad replied, it's a deal. I looked at them both, very confused. My dad walked over to me and placed his hand on my shoulder and said, son, I envy you in a way, but at the same time, feel a great deal of pity for you. Still confused, I asked him, what do you mean, Dad? Well, you did just hear the agreement that was made. At this point, you will be the apprentice of Mr. Holmes. Honestly, the man is a mystery to many. He knows quite a lot as well. You should do well to learn from him. This hit me all at once. Wait, but wasn't I going to be working with you at the Vatican after this year? I inquired. Yes, but now you have opened a door far greater than we imagined. He looked over at Vincent. You will let him finish his schooling before taking him on full time? My dad asked. Vincent laughed, then said, not that there's any real point to it, but I will extend you this one favor, as a professional courtesy. Thank you, my dad said. Then I asked, I do have a question. How are we going to get home? At this moment, we both heard a snap, and then we were surrounded by darkness, and then we found ourselves in my dad's office. Well, I better tell your mom we're home to let her know what happened. Why don't you head to your room and get some rest? My father advised me. I didn't argue with him. After all that had happened, I needed a little rest, so I headed to my room. Once there, I opened the door and saw someone sitting at my desk. I quickly turned on the light to see Sabrina sitting there. I was quite puzzled. I asked, why are you here in my room? She looked up at me from the book she was reading. I had no idea how she could be reading in a pitch-black room. Then she replied, my father told me to keep an eye on you, remember? Now that he is responsible for your well-being, I was asked to make sure his words hold true. Huh? Was all I could get out. She shook her head and said, if any great harm befalls you, my father's life is forfeit, and must allow himself to be killed by your father, as they agreed. And to make sure that it does not happen, I am here to keep an eye on you. I sat on my bed to think about this for a moment. Okay, I get it. But where are you going to sleep? She looked at me a little puzzled for a moment, then replied, I don't sleep. I looked at her a little shocked and asked, ever? She seemed to think on this for a moment before replying, no, I can if I want to, but I don't need to. I laid down on my bed and looked up at the ceiling, thinking about how my day had started. and how it was now ending. But one thing went through my mind. What am I going to do with this non-sleeping girl in my room, watching me all night? It was at this moment I saw her face. She kissed my forehead and said, "Rest your mind for now. The answers will come with time." And then the lights went out, and I fell fast asleep. That was a nice story. I hope you enjoyed the story of my first encounter with young Mr. Cross. If you did enjoy it, please hit the like button. And if you wish to hear more, please make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell icon on your way out. Thank you, and I wish you all very well.